Hey everyone, it's Naomi. Waiting to be live. Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf here at Facebook Live, and it's Thursday. Happy Hanukkah. I promised you a more in-depth look at the flaws in COVID reporting on COVID maps. So since my last update about the pandemic, which is very real, but also about the incredible flaws and problems in reporting the pandemic, especially on these COVID maps that all the major media are using. And I'm talking about the United States, but these COVID maps are also in use in Britain, in France, in Italy, in every, global North nation, and probably around the world. But since my last update, I've learned even more truly horrible things about this kind of industry of manufacturing COVID data or using COVID data in a misleading way. I've been doing a lot of this reporting on Twitter, but I want to, update you, my community on Facebook Live. So some of the big insights to recap of the last week and a half that I found. Number one, who is messaging about coronavirus? There's something we discovered called the COVID-19 Response Project. And this is kind of a COVID messaging consortium of the very biggest players on the global corporate stage. A lot of these are big tech, but some of these names will really blow your mind. Some of the partners in the COVID-19 response consortium are Nintendo, see if you see a pattern, Zoom, see if you see a pattern, Google, Microsoft, Bloomberg, Facebook, right? NASDAQ. Okay, so think about the names I've just mentioned. They all got together and created what is basically a propaganda shop or a messaging shop to communicate about COVID-19. So what that means, and something else that people really need to understand, is that messaging that you get isn't neutral, even if it's in a newspaper, even if it's from a think tank, even if it's on an op-ed page. I wish that it were always neutral. I wish that it were a free flow of ideas in an open society, in a democracy. But in fact, what is happening when you are reading the newspaper, or especially on social media, but even with just major news sites, is that a lot of the information that is taken on for mainstream news sites comes from think tanks that are funded by special interests. I'm sure most of you know this by now. So, newspapers are on a shoestring. Their profits are being squeezed more and more. Their advertising model has collapsed. They're struggling to survive. So then you get something like the COVID-19 Response Project, which is manufacturing whole COVID maps, for instance, that can be plopped right into major news outlets like USA Today, like the New York Times, right? So how does that happen? Bloomberg funds Johns Hopkins COVID map, okay, which every single news outlet is citing. You guys have heard me talk about that one before. Bloomberg also funds the COVID-19 Response Project, as well as Zoom, Microsoft, Nintendo, the NASDAQ, and so on. The COVID-19 Response Project funds the Blavatnik School of Government in Oxford, where I was a student and of which I am a graduate. So the Blavatnik School of Government is a kind of creepy, relatively new institution in Oxford that, and let me know, by the way, in the comment section if you can hear me, all right? But the Blavatnik School of Government, you need a clearance to get inside. It's very high security. It's not like most, institutions in the university that are open. And it's it's kind of secretive, and it has created this COVID map that the New York Times uses without scrutiny, without hesitation. So then, if you see what's happening with COVID maps, and we'll get into the details of that, in shortly, what happens is COVID maps are presenting COVID data. Wonderful. Hey, Kelly. Hey, I'm glad you all can hear me. In ways that aren't exactly lying, but as I've said many, many times, as CEO of a data tech company that presents government data, Daily Clout, just like these COVID maps are claiming to do, or in the business of doing, they're presenting the data in a way that is extremely misleading, right? And I've said over and over again, you can tell any story with data. If you run a digital site, you can tell any story with data, which is why I'm always saying, where are the data sets? What are the sources? What's the methodology? And again, to recap, sources are when it says on a COVID map that there are 200,000 cases today, what is a case, right? How's that defined? And where is that evidence coming from? And who's giving it to that site? That's a really important question, because a case could be anything. A case could be a test result. A case could be someone talking to a doctor. A case could be someone in a clinic, someone hospitalized, right? Could mean anything. So you need to have the sources identified, and you need to understand what is the process of that information getting to that COVID map. And the second thing I'm always saying is, what is the methodology, right? The methodology, as I often say, is just a fancy word for what systems did you use to identify this data? And lastly, where are the data sets? And again, I don't mean to turn you into, super nerds, but you have to understand this. Our lives depend on it. Our kids' educations depend on it. Our freedom literally depends on it, because they're not linking the data sets. They've started to, and we'll get to the surprises inherent in that shortly. But data sets, it's not complicated. It's not scary. It literally means, and with digital technology, there is no reason not to do this, right? You don't run out of space with a digital website, by linking the data sets. Data sets are CSVs, they're spreadsheets, and they literally show what those numbers are, right? So you can go in and see that if they claim that there were 65, cases in Benton County, Oregon, you can see not people's names because of HIPAA, but you see, where they were, you see what date they were registered, you see everything that can help you understand that these are real cases and not just something that was made up out of thin air. And again, journalism, it has to be verifiable. That's science too, right? Both in science and in journalism. You can't just say shit, right? You can't just make things up. You have to be able to present evidence that can be checked and confirmed. Okay, so what is happening, and why is the NASDAQ involved in the COVID-19 response project? What is happening, I've been saying this for a while, I can't say it enough, is that the people who know what the numbers are going to be on the COVID maps, which every major news outlet, like the New York Times, like USA Today, is just reproducing without question, right? Or else they make their own COVID maps and cite themselves without providing the data sets, the sources, the methodologies. The person who knows 5 minutes before those COVID numbers are published what they are going to be has 5 minutes to get on his cell phone or get on her cell phone and short or long the economy. All right? They can put another $100,000 on Amazon if the numbers are going to go up. Strikingly, they can put another $100,000 on Nintendo, right? You get where I'm going with this? They can put money on Pfizer if they know that the numbers are going up. People are going to be really scared. People are going to be, getting a barrage of news to get a vaccine. These are legal insider trading on the economy. So you've seen some high profile cases recently in which people were busted for doing exactly that. And I just want to note that reports are coming in that the top billionaires who run Facebook, who run Google, who run Amazon, have earned $1 trillion in aggregate since the coronavirus pandemic began. All right. So as I've said before, COVID or medical public health policy isn't a transparent mirror image of the need of citizens. That is not how it works. Again, I wish it did, but now I'm speaking, as I have before, as a former political consultant. COVID policy, those policies of lockdown in 3 tiers in Britain, and shocking, even worse in the US, policies I'm hearing about in Scotland that you can't have household visits, and in Ireland that people are isolated in their homes, right? These are countries with low COVID infection rates. Not that it's nothing, but we'll get to what that really means shortly. Policies like, the governor of New York State, where I live, just announced that restaurants have to go from 50% to 25% seating capacity, crushing the restaurant industry without providing any science at all, right, to underlie that this is scientifically useful. Virginia just issued a curfew, which again, as I pointed out, doesn't even make epidemiological sense because a curfew just literally crunches more people into fewer hours. Right? Being out, being in the fresh air, even being out at night is an important way to not get sick with COVID, because it's much harder to get sick when you're out in the fresh air, and certainly, going out with a friend for a walk at night. So there are these horrific policies that are destroying small businesses. 10% of small businesses have closed. People are running out of money. People are being evicted. They can't eat. They can't feed their children. Domestic violence is up 150%. Well, those policies are not a mirror image of a public health crisis, even if they were constitutional, which they're not. Those policies are influenced by pressure from big donors to both major political parties, big influencers on outcomes of the Tories or Labour, for that matter, in Britain and around the world. And they say, hey, Governor Cuomo, we've got this huge investment in distance learning platforms. Do you really want to open schools? Or isn't it kind of a better idea to keep everyone safe by distance learning, whether or not the numbers support that at all, or epidemiology supports it at all? Big tech, Nintendo, Zoom, right? They are influencing public policy. And as I've said before, I'm just going to stop saying as I've said before, because these are cumulative, almost kind of, they have to be repeated. They're points that have to be repeated because each one builds on the other. But to a tech company, time that your child is in school with other children, playing in a playground, talking to a real teacher, time that you are with your fellow community members in a church or a mosque or a synagogue worshiping, time that you are walking with a loved one, without a mask, without endangering anyone, no one else around, right? Safely walking, enjoying the fresh air, being safe, being careful, not breathing on anybody, but not on a screen. Every minute you and your loved ones spend not online is wasted profit from their point of view. So really what you need to understand is that this is kind of a war on humanity. This is a war on human beings. It's a real pandemic. Don't get me wrong. It seems like a very virulent strain of coronavirus. I am not diminishing that, but the same companies that profit from driving you, isolating you, driving you online, making it safe for you to see your best friend on Facebook, or on Twitter, or on FaceTime, or through a portal that is digital, but not safe for you to see your best friend, for a lovely walk in the woods where you're not harming anybody, right? Those are the companies that are influencing public policy announcements, and those are the people who, with their best friends, are betting legally on the economy, shorting it when you all are going to be told to stay home and lose your livelihoods, and investing in certain sectors like big pharma when there are numbers that go to public health announcements of mandatory vaccinations, for instance, or that are longing Apple when Apple is building a track and trace system. So it is a closed system, and you are the commodity, right? It is not you running the economy, you using technology, you electing your elected officials who are serving public health. It's the other way around now. We're in now a closed circle of digital technology building the messaging machine, the COVID-19 response project, building the coronavirus maps, slicing and dicing the data to make it say certain things that serve their interests, building the distance learning platforms, building the track and trace apps, and really cannibalizing you. And really they are not going to let you go. I mean, I'm just saying that if you don't understand, that they are not going to let you go, right? It's not like there's going to be a day when you wake up and the headlines will say, okay, numbers are at a reasonable level of infection. This virus has, pretty much done its worst with human population. We're on the upswing. Everyone can come out now. You can hug your mom. You can send your child to school. You can get off the screens. That will not happen. I'm telling you, that will not happen because this is so profitable, okay? And that is not minimizing how serious this virus is or how serious this pandemic is. It's that we have to be grown-ups and think two things at the same time. A, there's a serious illness. I know people have had it. It's real. B, it's being exploited to change human civilization forever unless we resist, so that we are never getting out. We will have to say, please, master, release me for the rest of our lives, because it is so profitable for them to drive all human interaction onto digital technology and to track and trace us forever. And also, this goes to things I've been writing about since the end of America. There's always a war on liberty. No one who's powerful wants you to be free. No one who's powerful wants you to be able to change your elected officials, because right where we are, right, unable to communicate in a town hall, unable to have a conversation that's not, recorded on Zoom, which is owned by people who are not private and not our friends, not able to, fall in love freely, to congregate freely, to worship freely. That, we are weak as humans. We are weak as a society in relation to people who want to strip us of our liberty so they can stay in power forever, and people who want to plunder, basically our nations, as is happening in Australia, in Britain, and in the United States right now. And finally, the people, big tech and big pharma, who literally would love to have us never, ever, ever, ever leave our homes again and be subject to whatever, intervention is the latest that is lucrative, that we will allow in our bodies or not even have consent for, because there will be mandates that anything can be injected into us, or our bodies can be manipulated in various ways, as is already happening. That, do not be a battered wife. Right? Do not fall prey to Stockholm Syndrome. Do not think if you're just good, he will stop beating you or she will stop beating you. He won't stop beating you. You will not be released. You have to take matters into your own hands. So how can you do this? I'll get to that a little bit. I just want to say there's some movements that are positive. In Portugal this past week, a judge ruled that it is a violation of human liberty to restrain healthy people in quarantine. And I've written an essay about how quarantine, lockdown is not quarantine. Lockdown is beyond what any free society has ever done. So in Portugal, a judge said it's a violation of human liberty to restrain healthy people to restrain their liberty. And there's also attention on the PCR tests. And that decision said the PCR tests are not accurate enough to constrain people's liberties on the basis of them. So if other countries follow the lead of Portugal, that's certainly the way to go. Our Supreme Court rejected a lockdown measure here in New York State. Governor Cuomo wanted to forbid people from gathering to pray. And the Supreme Court said no. And a lot of my friends, I'm on the left, were opposed to that ruling and thought that it was kind of a crazy conservative ruling. But, the Constitution is very clear. We have freedom to assemble, First Amendment, freedom to worship, First Amendment. So that was absolutely a good ruling. And so there have to be more and more lawsuits. There have to be more and more demands, through the legal system to require our human rights to be given back to us. And again, this is not to say there aren't careful things that need to be done in a public health crisis. But as one lawyer pointed out to me, like with closing the baths briefly during the HIV epidemic, these things have to be proportionate, they have to be short of duration, and they have to be subject to legal review. And that is not what we're seeing now in these wholesale closures. So now I want to drill down a little bit into a couple of horrible flaws in the COVID data that is being presented to you. So first of all, COVID-19 tracking is a project hosted by not even a medical site, hosted by The Atlantic magazine, which is a magazine here in the United States. I've often said, because I drilled into the numbers, their methodology is to have unnamed volunteers upload unverifiable data. That's their methodology. But every major news outlet cites COVID-19 tracking, which is bizarre to me. So as I've said before, the only real data sets that are solid, at least in the United States, are state health departments. Those are good numbers generally. And those are going to be reports from doctors' offices and reports from clinics and hospitals. And also death counts are pretty solid from state health departments, even though we know for sure that when someone is hit by a bus and has COVID, it's listed as a COVID death. If someone dies of cancer and has COVID, it's listed as a COVID death. But even when there's something really scary that's happening with maps like COVID-19 tracking, and I'll tell you what it is. They are all reporting their numbers cumulatively. And this is happening in France, and it's happening in the UK, and it's happening in America. And what do I mean? In Oregon, there is, for instance, a statement in all the news sites that 890 people died of COVID. And you'll see that. You'll see, there are 250,000 deaths from COVID. Well, that may well be true, but the way it's reported is today, right? Today, December 10th, 890 people died of COVID. That's always how it's presented. That cumulative number is presented in these maps very misleadingly as today's number. And so you go, oh my God, but it's not true. And I did the math for Oregon, where my mom lives. And if you divide it by 12, you get about 80 people dying a month. And then you map it against the other causes of death for Oregon. And you see that it's like number 8 or 9 or 10 in Oregon for causes of death. Not trivial. I don't mean to diminish every loss is tragic. All those families are grieving. But it's the same cause of death number as suicide or drug overdoses. So my poor mom is not going out, not seeing loved ones, not letting me hug her, living like a prisoner, which affects her, health and well-being. But when I explained to her that actually 890 people didn't die today, 890 people have ever died, and you have the same chance of dying of COVID as you do of dying of suicide or a fatal drug overdose in Oregon, it's the same numbers, right? But she understands them now, and she's making different decisions about her daily life that I think are better informed decisions. So, but that's what we're seeing over and over and over. Cumulative numbers are presented as if they're today. The other thing that does when you map numbers cumulatively is every day you see a sharp rise to the right, a sharp rise to the right, a sharp rise to the right on a map. And that's what you see. And you go, oh no, this is catastrophic. But when you map numbers cumulatively that go back to a year, right, you are going to get every day a sharp rise, a sharp rise, a sharp rise, because the last day's numbers, even if they're lower than the day before, are added to the total. So it's always going to go up. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm going to say it again. Someone said, Zoe said, highly dubious and inaccurate, but not exactly lying. So I'm going to say it again because it's so important. Every day you open the paper, you turn on your computer, there are these giant maps that have a sharp, steep rise to the right, coronavirus, cases, and deaths. Again, these are cumulative. So if on Monday 20 people died, and on Tuesday 10 people died, and on Wednesday 3 people died, when you map it cumulatively, it's going to go up and up and up, because it's going to go 10, 5, 3, because you can't undo what happened in the past. You're adding to it. So even if it goes down to 0, right, it's never going to stop as long as anyone ever dies again in the future. So you have to understand that, right? And North Dakota, which has been getting a lot of flack for not going along with coronavirus hysteria, really, again, disproportionate to the real threat. Much like terrorism, it was a real threat, but thank you, South Dakota. I actually meant to say South Dakota. Their COVID maps look really, really different. Let me map it, and then we'll upload these so we can show you. We haven't figured out how to do it simultaneously. On the South Dakota COVID map, it's got that steep, steep rise to the right of the cumulative numbers. But they also add the line for recovered under that. And that's 85% of the total. So you see the line under it of people who've recovered. And then they subtract the people who've recovered from the total cases, and they get a number that kind of goes like this. Okay? It's up and down, trending down. That's how many people are still sick. And then there's a deaths number, and those are the real numbers. But if you looked at those real numbers, taking away people who've recovered, then you do not get that steep rise to the right. You get a much more moderate curve. Nothing to ignore, but much more moderate. And the other thing you need to do when you do this math is divide by population. When you get cases and tests, which is this giant scare headline that everyone is announcing, what are you measuring? You're measuring people who already think it's a good idea to get a coronavirus test. So it's a self-selected population, and then it's showing the positives of that self-selected group. So of course, the more you test, the higher the numbers are going to be, even if the numbers in the population are going down. You understand that? The only way to get real data about how prevalent the infection is in your community is to test people randomly, right? Test the population randomly. Then you can see if numbers are really going up or going down. But that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing self-selected people who are more likely to be symptomatic, and the more they test, the higher the numbers are going to be. And there's a last thing I really, really want to say. In Elias' case, says, Naomi, look at cause mortality from South Dakota on CDC website. No excess deaths in March, April, May. And I just want to say something else about the CDC, so sneaky. They started to report COVID deaths as PIC, pneumonia, influenza, COVID, because it's a more robust number. So they're lumping them together. You always are going to have tens of thousands of people dying of pneumonia. It's very sad. It's true. You're going to have tens of thousands of people dying from influenza. It's very sad. So now they're lumping coronavirus deaths together with these guaranteed deaths. In 2017, 70,000 people died in the United States from influenza. So that is sneaky as well. And then the last thing I want to say, which is so sneaky and evil, and I say this being the president, I'm sorry, the CEO of a data site, right, is I kept saying they're counting multiple tests of one person as multiple cases. I am sure of that because no one could present to me the metric, and at Daily Clout, my company, we worked really hard to make this happen. When you run a data site, you have to make sure that you're controlling to make sure one person, in my case, doesn't vote multiple times, thus counted as multiple people, right? And that's why you have logins, right? The login and the password guarantees that, like on Daily Clout, if we didn't rule out by having a login and a password, then, AstroTurf campaigns could send 5 people that they hire to vote 500 times, and it would look like 500 people voted a certain way on a bill, right? So we had to carefully control for that, put up a gate, create technology, and it's very common, it's not difficult technology, that makes sure that one person is counted as one action on our website. Well, with COVID data, they're not doing that, right? Because it's illegal. HIPAA law says you can't count people by using PID, which is personally identifiable data. You can't use people's names. All right, so if you're not using people's names, all you're getting is positives, 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 negatives, positives, positives. But you cannot control if it's 10 people of which 7 are positive, or one person taking 7 tests that keep being positive. And I know many people now who have had 3 or 4 or 5 tests, and I'm hearing anecdotally about people who are testing multiple times, and sometimes they're positive and sometimes they're negative. All of these tests are being counted as cases, even if it's just one person, which skews the total dramatically by multiples of scale. And again, over time, as more and more people test, like students have to test every week, some teachers have to test every week, nurses have to test every week, all of those tests are showing up as cases if anyone is positive. They're showing up as multiple cases, not one person, multiple tests. And if you doubt this, my husband, Brian OShea of Centurion Intelligence, who's going to join us in a minute, went on the COVID-19 tracking site and found them saying that they do not control for multiple tests. They treat them as multiple cases. So that's my summary of how nonsensically this COVID data is being presented to you. And you have wonderful, wonderful questions. Brian, do you want to join us?
Sure.
Okay, so now I'm going to introduce, again, you've met him before, talk about other things, my husband, Brian OShea, and I bring him on because he did a deep dive into the COVID-19 tracking project. What did you find?
Hello, everyone, first of all. Well, what I found, which was I'm sorry.
So well, first I'd love for you to introduce yourself and what you do, and then I was especially interested in how you found on COVID-19 tracking, here I'll get into the frame as well, you found on COVID-19 tracking who was generating the data and what ties they had to other industries.
Right. So not so much who was generating the data. What I did find was, first and foremost, my background is both as a detective. I'm the CEO of Stryker Pierce, and then also as in the various fields of business intelligence and intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And really what we're trying to look at first is not so much the headline. Like the headline is a good lead. I always look reverse of what the headline's saying, and that's my best lead. So if someone says, this person's bad, I'm going to try to find out why they're good while still staying objective. So what I did last night, hearing about all these disparities, listening to Naomi talk about them, I just started looking myself. And the first thing I noticed right away was the definitions were a little bit hinky, so for lack of a better term. So what I'm going to do, because we couldn't share the screen in time, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get on the feed and I will post some links as I talk. So I might be looking down every now and then. It's so I can show you the link of what I'm talking about. Does that work for you?
Sure.
Okay. And I also want to comment too that, I see a lot of comments where people start questioning the data and they get vilified. And, why are you doing this? And, this is horrible. Don't you care if people are healthy? Well, of course, everyone cares. We all have families and friends and ourselves, and we want to be healthy. But I always say, if you're going to do something, make sure it's being done right. And what scares me about what I've seen and what you've seen, lots of you have seen, with regard to businesses really having buy-in into this. I'm sure Naomi has just heard you discuss some of the data and some of the companies behind it, especially what's coming out of overseas, is when business gets involved, I think, in a health issue, having looked at businesses doing everything from counter-competitive intelligence to having been in several major firms, I'm not saying they cut corners, but I am saying they have shareholders. And those shareholders may want something to be a little bit more profitable. They may want something to, move a little faster because they want to make, that quarter's numbers. And that to me is why I look at the data. Not because I'm trying to debunk anything. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I was in the military. They used to give me 15 vaccines a month, and I still don't know what I'm vaccinated for. But it's so I know, okay, who really has an interest in this? Are they really that interested in a vaccine, or is it really ready to go? Will it make me sick? And that's pretty much. I just wanted to say that. So certainly not. This is a nonpartisan issue, and it's my belief that everyone, and this is why I'm here, everyone should always really look at the data yourselves. Don't trust anyone. Don't even trust me. And that's why I want to share the links. Verify what I'm saying. And it is that kind of transparency, especially for my clients, but people I meet and who I show how to do deep dives, a lot of you I'm sure already know how to do these. But the more data you have that you found yourself, that's primary source data, not secondary or tertiary, but primary source data from the source, you're going to feel better. And you know what? It may end up that we end up in line getting our vaccine, but at least we know we're going into it with transparency. We know what's going into our bodies. We know what's going into our kids' bodies. So with that said, the first thing I want to, where would you like me to start?
I mean, I'm really interested in what you found about how the COVID tracking project presents the data, and I'm interested in in what you found about the intelligence company, basically, that that presented the data. And we're running we need to be a little tight on time.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I will send you a link to what I'm looking at. So if you are in front of a computer, or you can, if not, you can do it later, and I can summarize these and send them all to you. I'm going to go ahead and send a link to what I'm looking at right now. Oh, wait. I have to send that on the feed. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Why don't you just describe what you found, and then you can upload the links.
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I found was, first, how they're presenting the data. Looking at, the first thing I did was I went to the CDC, and I saw big disparities in numbers. Now, some people will say, oh, it's only 7 million in difference. That's a lot of people. And so that really got me interested. I know it's hard to collect data, and it's hard to aggregate all this data together from states, counties, local. I get it. But that's a big number, so that had me looking. So the first thing I did was I go to the About the Data page, okay? And I skip how to use the data. I skip the frequently asked questions page. I like to go to the definitions, okay? So if you go to data, you're going to go to the definitions and just see what you're actually, really actually looking at. If you look at these definitions here, some of them are just weird.
Like the definition of cases.
Do you want to?
Sure. So the definition of cases on the COVID tracking project, total number of confirmed plus probable cases of COVID-19 reported by the state or territory Ideally, per the August 5th, 2020 CSTE case definition, some states are following the older April 5th, 2020 CSTE case definition or using their own custom definitions, like Oregon, who defines every case as anyone presenting with cough or fever. Not all states and territories report probable cases. If a state is not reporting probable cases, this field will just represent confirmed cases. So translating that, what that means is that they're not only uploading or citing confirmed cases, they're citing estimates. They're citing, a definition that could be as vague as cough or fever. And so that is worth knowing about. And Danny Lucar says, thank you, both of you. We need people like you to speak truth. Elias says, by the way, Naomi, thank you for interacting with your audience. I'm only here because you're here. And I know, Brian, you probably feel the same way. So the other thing you see here is on hospitalization.
Yeah, it's about down on the same page.
Yeah, it says cumulative hospitalized, ever hospitalized. So here they're confirming that they present cumulative data. So total number of individuals who have in bold, ever been hospitalized with COVID-19. Definitions vary by state territory. Where possible, we report hospitalizations with confirmed or probable COVID-19 cases per the expanded CSTE definition. So they are acknowledging that when you open the New York Times and it says 250,000 cases, that means ever, including probable cases, estimated cases, weirdo local definitions. They're including it all. Deaths probable. Wait, stop. That's a big one. Can you show that to the...
Sure.
This says deaths probable. Okay. What is a death that is probable? Total fatalities with probable COVID-19 case diagnosis per the expanded CSTE case definition of April 5th. In some states, these individuals must also have COVID-19 listed in some states, they must have COVID-19 listed on the death certificate to count as a COVID-19 death. When states post multiple numbers for probable fatalities, the metric includes only probable fatalities with COVID-19 listed on the death certificate, unless deaths among probable cases is a more reliable metric in the state. So that's gibberish, which I actually know how to translate because I read this stuff every week. And that gibberish means they could have died of COVID, maybe not. That's what it means. Probably they died of COVID, but there's no guarantee. They don't have to have a COVID-19 on their death certificate. If some states have the process of saying they died of COVID-19, but they didn't, but they say they did, that's good enough for the COVID-19 tracking project. And then the last thing I want you to address, and we should look at some of these questions, is what you found about who's aggregating and presenting this data.
Yes, absolutely. So let me go ahead, and what you want to do to get to here is on the out. Now this is tricky because on the Our Data page, which is where you want to be, it's just covidtracking.com/data. This is, I'm sorry. This is quite annoying, and I will show you why. If you go to, for instance, you click on the whole picture that says COVID-19 tracking, it takes you to their Twitter page, which really annoyed me. And so
not to the data sets.
Not to the data sets. Now the data sets are here. Right below that, you're going to see CSV. Okay, CSV is, if I'm sure you guys know, is another word for spreadsheet. It's another type of spreadsheet. It will work with Excel. Now, when you click on that, you're going to get a spreadsheet that downloads automatically. Now, one really quick side note, when you're doing this kind of research, all the time, I highly recommend making sure you have a virtual private network, something like ExpressVPN. Don't laugh, but there's a really good one called Hide My Ass. That's out of the UK, and that will mask your IP address, not for nefarious reasons, but you don't want to get bombarded with all sorts of weird algorithms for advertisements, that sort of thing, or be tracked. I like not to be tracked. So with that said...
So who's behind this data?
Okay. All right. So that spreadsheet there, the one that I found last night, I cannot find today.
And I've been promoting that we're going to be exposing the COVID-19 tracking project today.
I have it.
Oh, okay.
Well,
you saved it. Good.
That's another thing. Save everything. Save everything. Download it. If you can't download it, right-click or control-click on a Mac, and go ahead and print it to PDF. Save everything. Not just the URLs, they disappear. So
we need to disclose who's behind it, darling, because we're
getting
there.
Time.
Okay.
So the COVID-19 community data collection. This is really interesting. There are, and we will send you this link. As a matter of fact, I will send it to you right now because you're paying for this data. We all are that pay taxes, so why not? All right, so I'm going to send this right now so you could all have a look for yourselves and not take my word for it. Okay, sorry. All right, so who's behind the data? I mean, I'm not going to say who's behind the data because I was looking at this for the first time yesterday and it got pretty late. So there is...
They're blocking you out now?
I totally got blocked. Brian
just got blocked. It says you can't comment right now.
That's okay. I'll get it to you. So the point is, looking at this...
wasn't it a company that is a private
yes.
company?
Oh, no, I have it right here.
Okay. So you need to say it before they cut it off altogether.
Yes. All right. So if you go into... you have to go into the tabs. All right. Contributors. No. Sorry, guys. So the name of the company that I found that is shown as one of the...
contributors, meaning aggregating the data.
Yeah. Is a company that is called Enigma Incorporated. It is a US-based company, and it is... Gosh, I'm really sorry, but let me actually... So what this is I will get this all to you. This is actually a business intelligence company.
In your line of work.
No, it's like, so this is the type of company, Enigma, from what I could tell from their website, this is the type of company that businesses will go to find out all the intelligence they can about a CEO, a company. It might be a company they want to buy, they want to partner with, they want to exit from.
To make investments.
To make investments.
To invest in the stock market also.
Depends. I mean,
but that is one use. I mean, one thing that really struck me when you said that Enigma, what is it called? Enigma
Incorporated.
Enigma Incorporated is one of the volunteers uploading COVID data for the COVID-19 tracking project, is that, people are engaging in insider trading legally with these numbers. So this is a company that, I mean, people in your line of work help companies short and long stocks. They can make some stocks look good. They can make some stocks look bad.
No, I mean, it's more like people in my line of business on my end.
Okay.
That's close, but we're not helping them. They do whatever they want with the data. Our job is to get the data and to get it very objectively. We're not part of the decision what they do with it.
Okay, I didn't mean people in your line of work.
Okay.
I'm sorry, honey. I meant
okay.
Enigma Solutions. Right? They're not a medical company, right? They're not a government agency. They're a private company, and their job is to help people make money. Is that correct?
No, their job is to provide
intelligence so that people...
really granular data about businesses and companies, so those companies
can make commercial decisions, right? Not money. Health decisions, not public health decisions.
I mean, unless you count investing in a
vaccine or a
company,
lockdown.
Sure.
All right, so that's the bombshell that I wanted to share with you guys. There are other people that Brian legally found who are the volunteers uploading the data for COVID Tracking Project, but I promise you that COVID Tracking Project, and I've asked them this directly, doesn't say that Enigma Business Solutions is their volunteer uploading the data. They claim that it's very high-minded. They claim that it's all governmental and medical, and you see now that it's not purely, it's highly corrupted data and data sets. And you see that there's a 4 million case disparity between COVID-19 tracking and the CDC numbers, and you see that they are admitting to presenting their data cumulatively so that every time you open a newspaper, it says shock horror, as if today there are 200,000 cases, and that's not true. And so that is our bombshell. So there's much more to say, but it's been 49 minutes, so I want to answer some of your questions. I have 2 nurse friends working in Toronto hospitals, and They told me they have people come in for respiratory illnesses every year, and placing people on vents is not unique. It happens all the time. And they've said the frequency is similar to previous years. I'm not surprised, and not to downplay the seriousness of respiratory illnesses, but when I was talking to my mom about the actual COVID death rates in Oregon, it's half the number of deaths from respiratory illnesses. Respiratory illnesses are very serious. People die of pneumonia, they die of asthma, and this horrible death that, has been very much in the news, it's very much like the terrorism scare. It's real, but there's like this granular fear porn, very real, about how you don't want to die in an event. You don't want to die in an event with pneumonia. You don't want to die in an event with influenza. Sadly, these things happen. And I'm not surprised to hear that when you actually go to the source, and nurses on an emergency room ward, they are eyewitness accounts, right? Brian and I drove to South Dakota to see if really things were so horrific in South Dakota. And we went to the hospital where all of these national news outlets were vilifying South Dakota, largely because South Dakota refused to lock down. And the governor is saying it's not the business of government to close businesses. And I who can disagree with that? So Brian talked to the nurses on the ward and the doctors on the ward, or the medical staff on the ward, and they said, and the security people, and they said that the images that were being used in the news was from another time at that same emergency room where a lot of people got sick with hangovers from the huge party.
Yeah, I believe it was like a New Year's a New Year's Eve thing from about a year ago. And we were just driving. We literally were just driving through South Dakota. We had a road trip all the way to the West Coast. Why not check it out? And it was empty. And I will certainly give you those photos to share.
Yeah, the parking lot was empty. The emergency room was empty. Oh, I went to the ER in Oregon for something unrelated. And I asked when I was checking in, could you please put me not near the COVID ward? And the nurse said, we don't have anyone here with COVID. So maybe she was telling the truth, maybe she wasn't, but that was a really, really empty ER. So I'm not diminishing the severity of this pandemic at all. I'm just saying we need real numbers and real eyewitness accounts. Quintana Leader, hi Quintana, said actors, actresses, and film, TV test daily, weekly. So all of those are being counted as cases, Quintana. And Quintana says, well, on a project, and since many productions have opened up. So those are all being counted as multiple cases. And Carrie Ann Dean says, I've heard that too. Kate Fulton says, thank you. Thank you, Kate. Carrie Ann Dean says, keep reposting. Janice Hugel says, I think you're brilliant, but much of this common sense information may feed this chaotic and pervasive conspiracy craze. The virus is real. Believe the career science and healthcare professionals. The cumulative numbers are skewed. Random testing needs to improve. I agree with you about random testing. Current leadership has failed on this basic communication. I will remain cautious and aware of my surroundings. Stay safe and healthy. Well, thank you, Janice. Let me speak to Janice first, and then you can speak.
I just wanted to comment on that.
I promise you will. I appreciate your concern, and I don't mean to minimize it, but the virus is real. When you say believe the career science and healthcare professionals, I mean, forgive me, but I've studied and investigated women's health for 35 years, and every woman I know, including myself, is a walking guinea pig for the OBGYN pharma conspiracy, basically, from needless C-sections to, women being encouraged to have breast implants that later led to, lupus and autoimmune disorders, to, Mirena that has to be, great advertising. This will free you up. And then they have to be removed so they don't puncture your uterus. Like literally every woman is a walking experiment. HRT, give you that bounce as you go through menopause, and then it turns out to give you stroke and blood clots. So forgive me if I encourage people not to just believe career science and healthcare professionals, because they're wonderful people devoting their lives to healthcare, but they're also huge special interests distorting outcomes. And I know that as a former advisor to the Clinton re-election campaign and to the Gore campaign. I know how public policy is made, and it's not pure. I too am cautious and aware of our surroundings, and so are you. We're not taking risks. We wear masks when we're close to people. We've been alone in the woods for 7 months. We know that it's serious, but people can make better public health decisions when they have real numbers. And by the way, this distortion of the data, it underreports as much as it overreports. In Florida, a whistleblower was just had her home, broken into effectively because she was insisting that they not underreport the data of who was getting sick. So this is about not politicizing the data. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Oh, and what I wanted to comment on was, at the beginning of this, we did say this is not about not following the advice of the experts. Certainly, I have a doctor. I follow her advice explicitly. This is about double checking. I was in the government for a while. That's why I check my data. No offense to the government or my former colleagues, but the thing is, everyone's human. With this kind of data, you're going to have mistakes. They could be innocent. They could be nefarious. I don't know. So it's not about we're encouraging people not to trust the data. We're actually saying the opposite. Trust the data with your own eyes.
That's right.
And the final thing I'll say on that is the biggest problem that I'm seeing is not so much what the experts are saying. It's just that our access to the experts in most cases is filtered through the media and through Twitter and through Facebook.
And through governments.
So by the time, it's like a game of telephone with this data. There's someone collecting it, and then it moves on and moves on. By the time it comes out of one of the presenters' mouths on one of the major news networks, we don't know what to believe anymore. And there are a lot of people that don't have access, believe it or not, to the internet or don't know how to use it. My mom, love her to death, but if I put a computer in front of her, it'd still be sitting there today if I bought it 5 years ago. And they trust the news. There were three stations growing up. We trusted the news, and the news is playing this game of, and I have to say it, hashtag fear porn. And it's just scaring the hell out of people. So this is not about not following. I wear a mask everywhere I go, okay, because I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but trust the data with your own eyes, and that's really what we're encouraging you to do.
Yeah, and I would also say do the proper math, because it's the same data. When you do the proper math with the same data, you get a much different picture of how you're going to live your life. I mean, I don't want to keep using my mom as an example, but when she understood that her chance of dying of COVID in Oregon was the same as dying of an opioid addiction, which, by the way, that's a huge public health emergency that no resources are being devoted to, she decided to very carefully join people in a distanced way for Hanukkah. And by the way, happy Hanukkah. So to me, knowing what it does to people's immunities when they're older, to be around loved ones, to participate in social life, to not be isolated, that has a medical benefit also. So it's just really giving people solid information and not bullshit math, honestly, which drives me crazy. So I want to read a compliment. Thank you, Judy Alder, to stat geniuses, which I want to say no, indeed. It's not that hard, but we lost that compliment, but it was nice. But that was sweet. Okay, so she said, thank you very much. Slow down, baby. Jennifer Hamilton said, nothing identifying about Enigma Business Solutions on the site when I click on About. That's shady. Yeah, that's true. I agree. Now, well, this is interesting. Elias K. said, another nurse friend of mine said the psychiatric unit at a Toronto hospital was full capacity, and a patient who was to be admitted for psychiatric care couldn't get a bed in the psych unit, but there were enough beds for her in the ICU. That's where she was placed, but we're being locked down to reserve enough ICU beds. And in Britain, there's a study that came out showing 16% of COVID infections are from the hospital. So to me, when you have a real crisis like this and there's not enough hospitals, there's not enough nurses, there's not enough PPE, we're rich societies, build capacity, let people be safe, let people make responsible decisions as they did in the HIV epidemic. When there was a horrible epidemic, people died, very tragic, but it was a free society. No one locked up everyone with HIV, though crazy people said lock them up. No one locked up healthy people. No one said the government's going to make sure you never have intercourse with anyone if you're HIV positive. It was a voluntary campaign to educate people to responsible behavior, and capacity was built also to treat, people in this crisis. That's what a free society should do. Naomi Nicholson said, so many people are dying. That is true. My husband works in a clinic. There's so many comments that comments are vanishing. And she said, people are dying and it's real. And I know that that's true. Our hearts go out to everyone who's sick, everyone who's dead. Of course, their families, real pandemic. But again, with the HIV crisis, in a free society, you deal with a public health emergency the way we did with typhus and cholera and Spanish flu and tuberculosis, which is still a 1% fatality rate in New York State. You don't lock down an entire society because we have freedom. We're not North Korea. And we need to deal with this crisis the way we have other public health crises as a free society. Naomi, please look into Dr. Kerry Mullis. He's a scientist who invented the PCR method currently being used to diagnose CV-19. Thank you. Science and the medical field have become very corrupted for profit, says Carrie Ann Dean. Kenton Hall says, are you being negatively judged because you want data? Wow. Kenton Hall, welcome to my life. Like literally every time I ask for just the facts, and this was true when I was writing since 2008 about how the terrorism is all too real. You know, Brian, having fought the bad guys, as, oh, am I not supposed to say that?
I thought I was the bad guy. So, just kidding.
No, darling, you're one of the good guys. But when I wrote about how the very real terrorism threat was being hyped and manipulated to scare people into stripping us of our civil liberties, I was constantly being attacked because I was asking for evidence. And no one should intimidate you from asking for the evidence in a free society. Let's see. Trust but verify. Sure. Adam Kickmeyer. That's a good slogan. Zoe Jenkins says FDA committee has given Pfizer's COVID vaccine an emergency use authorization with 17 yes votes, 4 no votes, and 1 abstention. Well, Dr. William Hazeltine, who's a colleague of mine, we publish him on Daily Cloud. He's one of the most respected researchers. He was a pioneer in HIV research, and he warns that the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine have not been developed in FDA-approved labs. So my fear is it's going to be rushed out, and most, side effects don't manifest for 2 years. So that is really a worry. But more what I'm worried about is this mandatory everything. Like the parents should decide if children, have their bodies managed in certain ways. I should decide if I take that vaccine or not. And we're really being forced into a social credit system like China, certainly in Britain, where they're floating the trial balloon of a freedom pass, where literally you get to work, you get to go to the theater if you submit to the state's management of your body. Jackie Guyot said both of you are full of shit. Okay, free country.
Well, the data doesn't, please verify that we're full of shit or we're not. That's all we ask.
Yeah. Loved your talk, Native America. You played a huge part in my awakening. Thank you so much, Carrie Ann Dean. You're so sweet. Thank you, Brian, says Melanie Calhoun.
Thank you, Melanie.
Some people just can't understand that denial ain't a river to Egypt, says Umbretta Zanetti. You gotta laugh. Statistical literacy is underrated, Susan Byrne. That's really true. And I really hope that we've shown you, and we need to end this broadcast soon because we've been talking for an hour. It's not that hard, right? That's what makes me sad. It's we're constantly being brainwashed that, like, as with Daily Cloud, we're always being told that government legislation is too complicated for people who aren't lawyers or lawmakers to understand. It's not true. And we've shown with Daily Cloud that you can patiently be walked through a bill and totally understand it. And the same thing is true with this data. You're constantly being messaged that this is, not for you, little lady, little fella, leave it to the experts. It's not too hard for you to understand. We've just walked you through the math. We've walked you through the data. We've walked you through what's wrong with it. And every single one of you and all of you out there, high school students, middle school students, anyone with, really any level of education can follow what we just shared. And again, as Brian says, if you don't believe us, check it for yourself. And Brian will upload the links, and we should really sign off, darling.
Yeah, we should. And I just want to say too that someone getting a lot of trust the science. We trust the science, I say, but make sure you're trusting the right science and the right numbers. Absolutely. And then I'm going to have to post these links on
That's my
Twitter
darling.
because Facebook literally kicked me off while I was posting links.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you saw the message, and I'll post the message too. So that alone right there should be a red flag to everyone. Whatever it is, this data is publicly available. I don't have some secret key to get in. And I'll show you how to do that. But really quickly, do you mind if I give my Twitter?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Give your Twitter.
So my Twitter, because this is where I'm going to post these things, is at Brian OShea, Brian O'Shea, OShea, and then S as in Sam, P as in Paul, I as in India, SPI. That means Stryker Pierce Investigations, one of the companies I own. So hopefully this was helpful. And if anyone does want to learn how to do more techniques to get at this stuff, I'll be posting a lot of videos on my YouTube channel at some point.
Absolutely. And if you want to message me or Brian, how would they reach you?
They can message me on Facebook.
DM or Twitter,
yeah.
Facebook, and YouTube. Okay. And we'll also upload the links onto Daily Cloud. So I hope that was helpful. Please share, and we'll update you, regularly because this is not going to end today. Be well, stay safe. Happy Hanukkah. Happy almost Kwanzaa. Happy almost Christmas. Sending love from our family to yours.
And thanks for having me.
My pleasure.